wind blows, I might even pay my toll.
Thank you all so much for being here. And we're very excited today to be diving into a topic of, I just love the word, adoration, of being adored, as I firmly believe that we all deserve the right to be deeply, deeply loved. To love and be loved is such the meaning of life, the fulfillment of life. So today I'm excited to be chatting with Justine on this topic. And I'm excited to see that we have some men here as well, which is also great. So welcome to the guys. So we're going to be talking from a female perspective, but I think it's very good for you guys to be listening in as well to find out what we're talking about, what we're longing for, and what relationship means to women. Before we dive in, I'd love to just have a sense who's here. Anyone who can put on the camera, that would be great, so we can feel like we're in one room together. And if you can just put in the chat where you are in the world right now, then we get a sense of our global tribe. So we've got Toronto and South Africa, Cape Town, fantastic. And Slovakia, wow, what a mix. Here, I'm going to add me, Mexico. Corfu, Greece, very nice. The Netherlands, Germany, Scotland, Thailand, Toronto. Wow, fantastic. Amazing. Wow, we are quite a spread from all over the world. And New Jersey as well. Massachusetts. Fantastic. Isn't this amazing? Aren't we blessed that we can gather together in this way? So my guest today, some of you have already met. Justine was one of my teachers in Tantra and classical Tantra and Tantric yoga. And she's dived very deep into weaving this ancient Tantra together with more modern tools of trauma healing and processes to help us pick our way through our confusion and find our way into truth and harmony and being able to create harmonious relationships. So I'd like to welcome Justine, who's there, I think, late at night. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Yeah, hopefully now that I just did that fake yawn, my mouth, my jaw's ready for a good yawn. But I love coming on here. I love our conversations. They always give me a lot of energy. So I'm ready for my pick me up at 10 o'clock from Shashi.
Great. Oh, well, I'm so glad you're here. And I'd like to invite this to be an interactive conversation to everyone who's here joining. And so please use the chat box here if you yourself have questions for Justine on this topic or areas that you'd like us to discuss and go into. Just put them in there as we go, and we can make this an interactive conversation. Because this topic is such a big one, you know, to look at relationships and how to have a harmonious one. So many people have had such a bad experience, right, with relating, getting triggered and having arguments and conflicts, and you know, there are people who just give up on the whole thing. And yet we never really give up, right? There's just always a longing for deep meeting, for deep union. So yeah, maybe we can just start by Justine, if you want to tell me why you're putting this together, like why you want to help women to find a place of being adored. What's your motivation?
I would say much of my own life and my journey, because so much of where I'm at now is the opposite of where I was at before. And I grew up very much a tomboy. I grew up with 3 brothers in constant competition with the men. Like I could bike further, carry more firewood, set up tent faster. Just like I was very stubbornly independent. And I had a lot of pride around that, like a lot of confidence and strength. And it was something that I thought I was really happy in. And I had no concept of feminine, you know, like I was for like woman empowerment, but feminine empower, like I just didn't even have the word or the context for it. And I was traveling around the world, backpacking, hitchhiking around the world, like full of my power, full of my independence. And I remember reading a book. It was a book of Osho, the Book of Women. And I can still see it. I remember it. I was in a bookstore in India, and I don't know, like I go into bookstores in India and I sit down and have a chai and I'm there for 2 or 3 hours. And you just like flip through all of these different books. And I was reading one passage. It just hit me. It was a paragraph, and it was something about like the feminine liberation movement was a bit of a farce because it's about women getting into their masculine. And so it's about them oppressing their own feminine then and demanding equality. And like, and I was a feminist at that point. I was like, what, like what? And then shortly after that, I go to an Ayurvedic doctor and he takes my pulse, which he should say, you know, your Pitta Vata, whatever. But he takes my pulse and says, you're very masculine. And I was like, and then I go to an astrologer and he's supposed to tell me I'm an Aquarian, Gemini, Leo. And the first thing he says is you're very masculine. I was like, guys, what do you mean? And then I was like, all right, so that book, these guys, something's going on here. You know, like, I feel like when we start to open to something, the universe just like really hits us over the head with it several times.
Uh-huh.
And so I joined a women's group. I had Mihaela as a teacher, and I started to explore this whole feminine thing and surrender thing. And she will probably say to this day, I was her most difficult student. Because I was just like, but wait a minute, but what, but like, but then I was like, okay, I'm an Aquarian. I like adventure. I'm going to give, this is an adventure into exploring the feminine. If I don't like it, I go back to my ways and just like, forget I ever learned about this stuff.
Nice.
And it's been a journey. As you can see, I went down kicking and screaming. So I wasn't like, oh, great. It's been an amazing, and every time I open up more and more to the realization of my feminine or softening or emasculation, it's a deeper sense of fulfillment, and every area of my life has improved. I am more powerful now as a woman because I'm in my feminine, and I'm more impactful.
Let's go into that topic. As I was listening, I was thinking, we've got to talk about power. I had a similar path. You know, I was actually in the army at one point. I went to a boys' boarding school and I was a physics scholar. Like, I was told that that's how I make it in the world. Like, those are the important things. And so I had a very similar path of totally annihilating my feminine. But then through sickness, through an ovarian cyst, I was forced to reclaim it for my own healing. So I really resonate as I hear your story of like, yep, been there. How many of us women were trying to make ourselves masculine to be powerful, as we use that word. And many who are listening to this, especially if they're still running that energy, are thinking, yeah, but how am I powerful if I go all feminine? And, we've been taught that it's not safe sometimes, it's not powerful. So do you want to share a bit about this topic of power? What does it mean to be more powerful, feminine?
Let's go in all different areas. I can talk about it being powerful as like a coach and being impactful, as a teacher, like with 100 students. So I can talk about it one-on-one, and I can also talk about it when I'm on the receiving end of sexual advances and energy.
Let's go there. Let's cover that
one. Okay. So I would say in regards to the sexual advances that come, I remember times, and there were a couple of times where this happened, where a man was more like objectifying, like, hey, it wasn't a respectful energy, but I responded from my power. And I was just like, thank you, as if he had given me a compliment. And he stood up, like I felt, and this happened a couple of times, but he stood up and was like, yeah, it turned him into a gentleman.
Nice.
Yeah. So that was one. And when I because before, when I would respond, like when I remember when I was in high school and college, and like, you know, I would go to parties with my brother who's 6'4", he's twice the size of me. And if somebody offended me, he's like, you better leave. She is going to rip you apart. And shifting that to one where I'm really creating a sense of safety because I'm not engaging in an aggressive way, whereas I did before. But here it was
Right.
like,
You used to be aggressive. So you didn't go into fear before you went into aggression. Like, you know,
yeah,
you went in, you masculine and
I went into that kind of power, like asserting my power rather than embodying my power.
right. Oh, nice. I like that.
So that I feel like that made a difference.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, I remember one time when there was a men driving by and they were honking, and I was getting all offended and feeling objectified and being upset. And then I'm walking with my roommate and she is loving it. She was like, whoa, come on back. I was like, okay, we are experiencing the exact same reality. She's elated and I'm angry. And I was like,
Yeah.
how do I want to be my life here? And then I was like, I could receive that as a compliment. They're driving by, they're checking me out. Like, and so I just started to shift. I started to be less offended because I used to take a lot of pride in getting offended as well. It was
Yeah.
like, you know, it was my sense of justice and these kinds of things. And so when I shifted that, and I just started to bring a softer approach to how I had to heal my triggers and what I was making things mean, so I had to do a lot of my own inner work around that. But then when I would meet people, I found that even in a confrontational moment, we would rise up when I would be in my feminine. Does that make sense?
You know, I'm thinking of a time I ran a women's group and this topic came up of like men hitting you on clubs and a woman getting aggressive about it. We did a Gestalt therapy on it where she was on the cushion of the man as well as the woman. And when she was on the cushion of the man, she was like, wow, it's really intimidating, like to have these beautiful women dancing around. It's really vulnerable to approach them. And maybe I drink a bit because I'm scared and then it comes out all like, oh, I love you, comes out not so well. But it's, there's a longing to connect underneath it. So she really had a change of heart. And then the whole group of women, we all went out to this little club in Copenhagen. And every time a guy was like, oh, you want to dance? The women would say, oh, thank you for your courage. Thank you for asking. And no, thanks, I'm good on my own. So they would reject them or they would say yes, but they would always thank them for their courage. Like it completely turned around. And then everybody had a better experience, And so I totally resonate with this. There's a triggering and an anger and an armor that we've brought up, and we're very touchy about it. And actually, now many men are afraid to even ask a woman to dance or to have a drink because of it. Yeah. And it's just creating a separation, and all of us are longing for love and connection. And so that approach isn't really helping anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. I love that they're just like, thank you. If a man asks me out, like, I am so honored, or like, thank you. And no,
yeah.
to summarize it there, but I think that that's such an important thing because it is so vulnerable. And I really want to honor that vulnerability rather than shaming it of like, how could you, and which is sometimes happening. And it's intimidating to initiate. So, yeah.
And actually, when we talk about feminine power, when you look at this situation, this example we're giving, there's so much power in the feminine, the power of attraction, right? It's like, it's attracting the, whether it's the workers on the side of the street or the drunk guys in the bar, it's a very alluring power, the power of attraction. And, turning that around and seeing it's a different type of power, from reaching out, it's receptive, which is exactly what the Taoists said yin and yang were. Yang is reaching out and yin is receiving. And we tend to only think of this penetration action as with the word of power, but actually, it's the power of attraction that is all over advertising and billboards. And so understanding that power and working with it consciously, I think, is a big part of our work as women, that we also need to be conscious, point the finger at the builders who are wolf whistling, but like see how are we handling the power that we have of being a woman.
I love that. Beautifully said. Yeah. And the responsibility around that. Yeah.
It's all been so unconscious for so long. And there's so much, when you look in social media, there's a lot of charge and a lot of blame, and all of that's taking us further away from the connections that I think we really yearn for. And I think even more so with the next generations, it can build up if we don't turn it around.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe we can talk about turning it around. So you run this program for women called Adored, right? Where you coach women through the way they're relating with men and with their own inner masculine. And so maybe you can tell me a little bit, as you've worked with so many women so far, what are the steps you think that women need to take on this healing journey? Or maybe before we even get to the steps, why is it that I hear so many women say, okay, I've done all this work on myself, I've done my yoga, my meditation, my healing, and now where are the men? So there is definitely a longing going on there. So maybe we could even start with that. Like, what are you hearing from women, and what do you think is going on that there are so many incredible women who've done work on themselves but are waiting for a partner?
Yeah, I mean, I could answer that in a couple of different ways. And I'm going to first start with my own journey around it. Is when I got into my relationship with the man who was more masculine than me, according to the Ayurvedic doctor. In that I was so in my masculine in that relationship, but I thought I was amazing. Like, I was like, I'm running everything. I'm running our yoga studio. I'm cooking, I'm cleaning, I'm his secretary. Like, I was controlling the world for us, and I took care of everything, but I was doing it in such a bossy way. And here was this incredibly masculine man with a wide open heart. And I just picked away at him with no clue that I was doing it. I thought I was helping him. And I got that feedback later on, and we're still very close, and there's a whole lot of love between us. But it was a major blind spot for me. And I see it as a major blind spot in women. Like, we've got this great intention to want to help them. So because we've done all of our work, it's like, let me show you how to do this. And then we're helping the men, but we're in our masculine when we're doing that. We're telling them how to do it. You need to do this, or you could do it this way, or this is how you need to say it. This is how you should express yourself. And we're not inspiring it through our own receptivity, openness, vulnerability. And this is something that I find women who have done their work, I am a very good example of this, are sometimes the ones that are most blocked when it comes to being able to get into the feminine and inspire the masculine in that sense, because there's so much of like what we know.
Yeah.
And then going into like coach or therapist mode, or like bringing a man into the conscious world. And there's and being like, oh, you need to be more masculine, or like, if you were more masculine, it would look like this. You cannot tell a man he needs to be more masculine and then want him to follow that direction. That's you and your masculine trying to pull out his masculine. And I see this happening all over. And so it's really about learning, what does it mean to be feminine? And that took me years, and it's still a process. It's something for us to explore, and it's not black and white. I can't sit here and give you like a list of like, this is, because I could probably break down each of those things.
How about then painting an example? So like what you're talking about is what is often called emasculation, right? When a woman is like, you're not masculine enough, or, you should be more this, you should be more that, like nagging and emasculation, and giving this direct feedback verbally to a man, basically telling him he's not man enough, and then he needs to do this, which is, as you point out, a woman being in her masculine, ironically, because she's giving direction. So that one, we all know that picture. How could that same woman, let's say a guy, let's make it like a real picture. Let's say the woman has got her life together to some extent, and then her guy is sitting on the couch and he's watching Netflix all day, and he's he stopped doing his yoga, and things are slipping a little. The model we know is like, start nagging him, telling him he needs to go to the gym, do yoga, blah blah blah. Now could you repaint that picture for me? How
Okay, so
he in a feminine way.
So let's say he's in his yin, which is feminine. So we've got the yin and the yang, and he's gone more into passivity, right? He's sitting and he's hanging out on the couch. And the tendency is for the woman to be like, you got to get up. So she goes into her masculine, because that's what happens. If he goes into his feminine, his yin, then it pushes her into her masculine. And when she goes into her masculine, it pushes him into his feminine. And yeah, so she may not realize that she might have done some things that put him into that place. So that's like the first module of Adored. It's all about bringing attention to these blind spots. So I'm going to do like a before, like the sequel to the scene that you just said, and then I'll go into the scene that you just said. So one, like, let's say a guy was taking initiative before, and he came home and he like started, or he picked up the groceries and started chopping the vegetables and doing the cooking. And then she comes in and she's like, oh, you forgot to pick this up, and don't chop it like that. This one's faster. And like, oh, you put the broccoli in before you put the carrots. They're not supposed to do that. And so then he's like, all right, I'm not going to cook anymore. When I take action, it just opens me up to complaints and criticisms. So then women don't realize it because they just think they're being helpful, giving helpful hints along the way. You know, you're going to chop carrots faster when you do it like this. But ladies, if we can compromise efficiency, we can increase connections sometimes. And that was a big one for me, because I am a very efficient person. And I was like, what's most important here? My way or intimacy? And so one is like just starting to become aware of all of these things that we do that push a man into being passive or not being active. And, you know, for instance, another one, and I'll explain this like on a hormonal level as well. If the woman is doing things, it's the end of the day, both people got back from work and she's stressed out, she's trying to cook dinner, there's kids, there's homework, there's, you know, stuff happening, laundry going in and out. And the guy comes home as well at that time. And then he comes in to help. And then she just goes on to be stressed out, overwhelmed, and busy with the next task. That's not going to necessarily create motivation for him in that moment. But if he came home and he was just like, sweetheart, go take a walk, go for a jog, go take a bath, take a hot shower. And then he saw that him coming and helping helped her to relax, it improved her life, then that in that moment is going to produce vasopressin in him. And vasopressin is one of the main male hormones right next to testosterone. Vasopressin is what a man needs to get off the couch. So if he does not have vasopressin, then it is like major willpower or major nagging to get off that couch. But if he has vasopressin, then that is what helps him to get up. He's like, I'm going to come up and I'm going to make a difference in this woman's life. But
that's the hero hormone, right?
Yeah. And if that happened enough where he came in and he helped, and then the to-do list got longer. That's what my partner used to say. He's like, I don't want to help with that list because when I help, it grows. I'm like, you're right. I'm so sorry. And so he didn't want to help because it didn't help, you know?
Didn't have a good effect he wanted.
Exactly. So if he's going to go in and take action, the yang initiative, then relax and receive it and let him see and feel that it makes a difference. You put a smile on your face, your body relaxes, the tension goes from the foreheads, your legs open, whatever it is, just like he can feel that he's made a difference in your life and an impact, and what he's doing matters, and it's correct, not incorrect. So those are some things. That's the sequel to that moment where he's doing Netflix and not really engaging in that moment. And then in that moment, the woman has to become more yin, more feminine. So curling up with him on the couch, like, let's say, I don't know, they have plans to go out to dinner and then he's just stuck and he's like caught in there. And so if she can come in, taking her shirt off would be a great one, or like putting on something sexy, because the visual, like the brain is very much it's on alert for visual stimulus. And so if she could, like, take her clothes off or wrap a towel around and walk in front of them, or just do something that can get some fun attention. And then, or just go curl up with him too, but curl up and do it in a really loving way, not a I'm disappointed with you kind of way, because then he's just gonna like, go into maybe freeze mode. Like, I'm not going to say anything here because she's upset and angry and I don't want to deal with this. And if we leave the TV, then I'm going to go into a process and I don't want to do that. So feeling a safe, loving connection, go more yin, and then inspire him to go into the masculine.
So basically the feminine, it gives inspiration and motivation to men to step up into their yang. So the true yin of like a woman really finding her surrender, also her beauty, her sensuality, and being there, inspires a man to find his true yang. It's like the vasopressin's gonna release and he's gonna want to be her hero, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Or just like, sweetie, when you're done with this show, I've got something that I really need to talk about. I want to talk about it. Feel so, and ideally it's not like you're not starting a heavy topic with him in that moment.
Otherwise the show's going to be really long.
Exactly. It's like,
find the 10-hour special.
Last one. Yeah. But like giving him, like, if you could listen to me talk this through, I've got something that's heavy at work, like, so he can feel successful. He can feel like he's helping you, and that he's going to be successful at helping you, because that's another thing that happens is like, I know,
give him an easy win.
An easy win, like something that he can do, that he's going to be successful at. And because what I see happening sometimes is when a woman asks for support, if she's struggling with something, and then the guy comes in and gives it, and he was coming in as the ally. So I have a whole module in Adore that's called Make Him Your Ally, Not Your Enemy. Because one of the things that happens is a guy comes in to support, and your frustration has nothing to do with him, but then he says the wrong thing. He tries to problem solve or fix it. And then you turn on him and get mad at him, like, what? And he's like, whoa, wait a minute. How did I become the bad guy here? Like, I was trying to help you and now you're mad at me. And so then I work with men. They say, I don't even want to say anything, or I don't want to engage because the conversation is going to go too long, or I'm going to get in trouble for saying it the wrong way. And so, and this comes back to our original topic of emasculation. We don't realize
I think it's really important for women to know what they need when they have something, and to be able to express it in a loving way, where I did it just this morning with my partner when he was fixing something. It was a cough. I was actually just coughing. It wasn't an emotional thing. And then he was going into telling me what I needed to do. And I noticed that wasn't really what I wanted. But I said, thank you for offering to help. And right now, I just love your empathy. I love his empathy. And then he was like, oh, babe, I can imagine it feels so awful to still be coughing. And I was like, oh. So I made it an easy win because I told him what I wanted. I also thanked him for his approach. Like, thank you for trying to come up with a remedy. But right now, I really would love your empathy. And then I got his empathy and I felt so good and he felt good. It was a win-win. And even my cough started to feel better.
A little soothing of the heart. Yeah. And I love that. I love that you connected to his good intention and acknowledge that, because that's so important there. It's like, oh, I'm trying to help and I want to be seen in this. And then giving them the information they need. Like, I feel like men don't succeed with us because they don't have the correct information.
And all they do is get told off for whatever they're trying until they stop trying anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so, when I've had, go ahead.
Well, what about the single women? So with all of this is like, we're in relationship and you got the man, you got your dynamic. What about women who are this typical picture we have of like, you've had to survive on your own, you've had to build your own business and, get maybe even a single mom, you got everything going in your life because you had to do it on your own. But then it's hard to attract a man in because you're holding your whole life yourself, right? And this is a common situation. How do those women begin to attract in a man but still keep everything going? Because until they're in a partnership where they're sharing things, they still have to kind of be in the masculine in their own life. But how do they switch it when they're meeting men? How do they navigate that one?
I think we can practice receiving all over the place. Because if you've got girlfriends, you know, you have a chance to receive there. So one, like being able to receive is a huge feminine thing, and a lot of women are not good at it. And so like if your friend gives you a compliment, or she offers you help, or she, you know, gifts you something, do you really receive it? Like, because there's something there, because if you can already receive what the universe is giving you, and then you're like, yes, thank you. Oh, yes. And then it's like the universe is seeing, okay, there is a beacon that's receptive. Like, let's give it more. And so I think that that's one thing to do. But with me going into this transition of me into my feminine, it wasn't just in my relationship. It was a huge transition in my work. And so just learning how to be in our softness, in our empathy, like the empathy that we can bring in those moments, because our brains are wired in a way that we have a stronger capacity, stronger natural capacity for empathy. So really using that and speaking to that, and just being able to nurture relationships and play on those relationships. So the way that you interact in your work, doing that in a feminine way, is a way to be able to bring that energy in. When one of the guys who went through my Lead Your Love program, so I have a program for men that's all about understanding the feminine and getting into the masculine. And he's the CEO, and he since has started to share with me, he's like, so I've noticed my secretary, and I think that she's really in her masculine. And then I noticed that she did that, and he just started to like observe it. So the more us being in our feminine is not contingent upon us being in a relationship by any means. And I think the more that we practice that, so there's also going to be ways that we nurture ourselves. If we are living in our masculine mostly throughout the day, and we're producing a lot of testosterone, we've got a lot of cortisol running, it is so important to take care of that. And the way that cortisol comes down in a woman's body is by increasing the oxytocin and the estrogen. And so she needs to do that with a hot bath, you know, like a talk with her girlfriend. So making sure that you've got these oxytocin producing activities in your life, whether you're with a man or not. Yeah. So important, because if we don't do this, like it's going to make menopause a whole lot harder. So that's one of the ways that I get my corporate women, like, if you do not start to get into your feminine, you will suffer physically, and this is what's happening to your ovaries. This is what's happening to your adrenals. And this is what will happen if you start to nurture yourself in this way. Like, our bodies were not built to work the same way that men do. So this is something to start to shift that and honor that. And this is a lot of work that I'm doing with my women who are in corporate, is like really honoring your feminine and bringing the feminine to the workplace. Yeah. So I think, and, you know, for women who are single, when I've had women go through Adored, it has helped them so much to heal their relationship with the masculine, because a lot of stuff happens because of misunderstanding sometimes. So like what I've learned about masculine and feminine has helped heal things that happened with my dad, which was like, oh, he was being a guy, I was being a girl, and I misinterpreted what he said. I made it mean this. And it was so helpful in that, because it, you know, that created some wounding there. And then I was able to heal that. And so being able to be like, let all of that go. Like, I had one woman who she didn't trust men, and she had a lot of reason to not trust men. She had been abused many times. And then she started to just see men in a different way because of this new understanding that will bring a man into your life as well.
I was just going to talk about that. Like, what about those women that have been abused? The women who were maybe even in their feminine, you know, in their vulnerability, but who suffered from abuse, violence, and aggression from the masculine. For those women, it's a bigger jump. It's not just like, okay, they're in their masculine running their life. It's like they have the embodied experience that it's not safe to be vulnerable. So how do you work with those women? Is there an extra step they need to take?
Well, some healing for sure on the inside, of like letting them know that the safety is something that they can bring for themselves around that. And when we say it's not safe to be vulnerable, I would love to explore that belief around what it was that was vulnerable, and was it their vulnerability that got them in that unsafe situation. Because probably it wasn't, well, I mean, who knows? I mean, I can't generalize around this, but to be able to try to see what it was that was going on there, like, you know, the unhealthy nature of whoever it was that had abused them, and what was going on for them. And so what can they do to keep themselves safe? So I'm going to bring it back to the woman in that moment, because a lot of times when I hear somebody saying like, well, I mean, physical abuse is one thing. So how to have healthy boundaries, how to notice red flags, and how to be able to get out of an unsafe situation before it becomes dangerous. So to be able to notice those things. So it really depends upon which situation it is that we're talking about and where they're at. If they're still noticing that they're inviting in toxic relationships, that's usually when I would put on a man ban. And I'm like, wait, no men right now. This is about you healing your relationship with yourself, developing a sense of safety, regulating your nervous system, doing some of that deeper healing. Because however wounded we are, we will call somebody in that is that wounded. And that's also why, like with the anxious and the dismissive attachment styles, as anxious as somebody is, they're going to get somebody that's that dismissive, which is usually going to just re-trigger our wounding.
Yeah.
And the dismissive one looks more cruel in that. But if you can heal the anxiousness, then you're going to attract somebody in who's less dismissive. And so that, like, that's being reflected back. And so sometimes I think if we can take some time to do some of our deeper own healing and clearing there, and then go and engage from that point, and know how to set boundaries and know how to see red flags and to speak to that in a really empowered way, where the woman can recognize it and keep herself safe, would help to increase those going into toxic relationships.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, that's very clear. Huh? I mean, when I said unsafe, I was meaning like when you're a child and you have violence around you. So that kind of vulnerability
Okay.
but as you're saying, when you're an adult, then you can bring your own, like inner masculine, if you want to call it, or your own protector on board to make it safe for yourself that you couldn't do as a child. That's part of the healing. And verbalizing boundaries is part of that, and making choices is part of that, and that this is important before, to take a little time out of relating. I like that idea, the man ban, and get that work healed. I also love how you said the practice everywhere, because I think that we relate all the time. We relate with the person that's packing our bags at the supermarket, or the person that opens the door for us. We're relating all the time, and we constantly have an opportunity to practice conscious relating before going into the big one where there's sexuality and all the deep issues are there, that we should be practicing with our micro relationships throughout the day.
Yeah. And with the women that I've had who were sexually abused as children, and in their teenagehood, and in that sense, I looked at to see the ways that their brain and their nervous system had coped, and the protection mechanisms that they had in place now because of that. So what were the beliefs? Like, men are unsafe, men are not trustworthy. Then how are they reacting to men now because of what happened then? So just starting to see the way that their protection mechanisms and coping skills are now manifesting, looking at it, thinking those things, that was a part of then, and that kept you safe, and you needed that. And let's see if you still need that now, or if we can find another way to keep you safe besides those ones. Because what happens is a lot of our childhood coping mechanisms are actually keeping what we want further away, but we need to come up with another role, another coping mechanism, another sense of safety to be able to let that go. And we have to bring that into conscious awareness. So that's also a lot of the work that we'll do through this as well. That's working when we go more into the emotions and what it is that's really getting triggered. Because when we have an engagement with our partner or with a man or dating and we get triggered, it's 95% of the time something deeper. And when we heal that, the triggers stop happening.
Yeah, amazing. Oh, I love that. That's so clear. I just want to say to everyone listening, as we only have a few minutes left, if you have any questions or topics that you'd like Justine to talk about here, then please put them over here in the chat. And I will include those questions. If not, I will just continue with my own dialogue. But I want you to have the opportunity as well. You can also, if you don't want to put it publicly, you can just send it to me in the chat and I can read it out. Great. So let's talk a little bit more about your program. So Adored is something that we have here on Live Tantra because we think it's really incredible work. But yeah, maybe you can just talk a little bit more about the journey.
Yep. Oh, 1 minute. I was going back and forth with the host of so 1 minute. Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead. The question was, say again. I get distracted when the chat's coming through.
Somebody's messaging you. No, that's fine. So my question was if you could just talk a little bit about the journey that you take women on, and then I've got another question for you that's popped up. So what's the journey that women go on Adored?
So one we go into first, as I said before, is about just becoming aware of our blind spots. Like, what are the ways that we are, and I'm going to say your man, but as I said, like, this is as much for singles as it is for somebody who's in a relationship, or for somebody who's in a relationship where there's a lot of tension and problems. Like, I had people come in who were on the verge of breaking up or who had just broken up and they were able to majorly repair it. And I've had people come in who were, just, it was fine, but they wanted it to be more, like more passion, more spark. So they came there. I had one woman who broke up right at the beginning of it. And then she was like, if I had only known this, this would never have happened, because she started to understand men in it.
Yeah.
So I really find that it's fitting for all women that are in a heterosexual relationship. It's more going to be fitting for that because I bring in a lot about the hormones. So while the polarity stuff that I speak to is valid for anybody and everybody, like I use polarity when I'm coaching homosexual relationships, but when I go into the hormones and how it's impacting the body, then that's something where I find that it's more of a heterosexual pertaining to a heterosexual relationship.
Okay, good. Yeah, I totally get it, and it's good to be clear. Excuse me, I'm just gonna picked up a bit of a cough here in Mexico. So for women who are relating with other women, it would be better for them to do private coaching with you so that you could talk about the polarity, but also support them in their particular hormonal balance.
Yeah.
Got a few questions for it, and it is a great question. I love this question. Getting a partner into Tantra training is being too masculine, ?
Depends upon how you get him in.
That was my answer. I'm like, wow, what does getting him in mean?
So one, like what I find, and I hear men, and I'm guilty of this as well, is like, I would want my partner to do something so he could learn because he needed to be fixed. And so if you approach it from that standpoint, then there's gonna, he's like, wait, what? Like, but if you went into like how he could support you in it, like, I want to do this and he gets to help you, he gets to support you, and it's not because he's insufficient at something, then that is going to be way more enticing. And I made this mistake because I would give my partner lectures. So I'm like, oh, let's watch this TED Talk. Let's watch this podcast. Let's listen to this book. And then at the end, he started just being like, what did you want me to hear out of that one? And I was like, I was trying to be subtle, but obviously I didn't do a good enough job there. So I think that that's something of like, what is it that you want to share together? And it's not something about how he needs to improve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really love that. I had a trauma where a man broke into my room, and so I went into trauma around the masculine, and then my partner came back from abroad, and I was getting triggered by him because he was a man. I would just go into trigger, and but I could see that, and I understand trauma, and I said to him, I'm going into these triggers, and it's nothing to do with you, but because you're a man, you're triggering it. But are you willing to help me through this? And he was like, yes. What do I need to do? And I'd say, okay, well, then if I can push hands, we can do this, and then this. And explained what I wanted to do in those triggers. And then he could show up as my hero, even though he was the one triggering me. He could see that he was more my hero than my villain, and that he could be the one to help me out of it. And I built more trust with him than any other man I've ever been with. So I think it's
Yeah.
so good to kind of be together resolving something rather than like, you need to do this thing, you know, like there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
So I really
Yeah.
resonate with that answer. Another question here is, how do you relate sovereignty to Tantra and freedom of the people right now? That's funny. I'm just talking about that. I think it's very relevant. How can feminine energy help people around the world right now? And how do we apply this to race and politics? It's a big question, but maybe you can say a little word about it, because we were just talking about this earlier before we went onto the film, onto live.
Yeah. So here, if when I think about the feminine, I think about the mother. Obviously, that's one of the archetypes of it. And if we were to think about, what if we had a kid who was just like really acting out, and, you know, let's say we had a kid that did something really terrible. How are you going to be towards that kid? What's going to help that kid to grow, to help that kid to heal? And so then where I come in is compassion. Like, you know, when we raise a kid, it's, you've done something wrong and I love you. And you're lovable, because a lot of that stuff can come from that place of pain. So as much as we are able to hold love, like, and being loving and being open does not mean that there are not boundaries, or that it's not like, this is not okay. But what is our inner disposition? Are we able to hold a place of love, of unity, of compassion, while at the same time, this is not okay? And so I think the more that we can bring in that unconditional love that a mother has into this, and being, because we're contributing an energy. And this was something that I remember really, I read a passage of Adyashanti when, and it was during my activist time. And this passage was, so many activists are contributing to the problem that they are creating because they're polarizing. So he's like, you can't have good without bad. If that is bad, then you are good. And you being good is like, and so he was way more articulate than I am right now. And he spoke about creating a mindset and an energy of unity. So seeing like, where is that in me? And this is a lot of the work that I've done with Byron Katie as well. So she has us like write down, like, what are your prejudices? Like, who is wrong? Who is bad? And then put that out there. And then through the work, you find that in yourself and you find your threshold. And this is something that I loved about the Zimmerman prison experiment, which was brilliant. If you haven't ever, have you know,
I studied
that?
psychology. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you can't study psychology and not learn about that. So I feel that what we might be able to, or if we can bring that energy in, and you've seen the documentaries, or like the documentary of Gabor Mate, where they're going into the prisons. And so there's people who have done these really terrible things, but when you meet them and you see that the human in them, you see the pain in them, then people soften in that moment. And so if we come with just our anger and that this is wrong, and then we're shaming or demonizing, and inside of ourselves, again, it doesn't mean we can't say this is wrong. We can absolutely say this is wrong, but what is our disposition? Are we in a unified place in our hearts? Are we having love? Are we having compassion? Because that's how I really believe that we can heal the world from our feminine, is the way that we are holding ourselves on our inner side.
And actually, if there are people acting out from a traumatized place, and then it's compassion that inner child in them needs in order to soften and heal. And actually, more judgment is just going to make them harden and go, double. And so I think this is so important. There's a wonderful story similar to that maybe you know, that David Data reported, that a woman was leaving one of his workshops, and this guy leapt out from behind a bush to like rape her, and she looks in his eyes and she says, "You're so loved," and she sees his inner child, and he starts tearing up, and no one ever said that to me before. And after some emotional release, he then says, "Hey, let me walk you home. It's not safe around here," and like literally goes out of his trauma body that's going out to violate a woman to his hero that wants to walk her home. And it's her compassion and her capacity, the feminine capacity to love and forgive, that supports that. So, you know, it's a very powerful story. And there are times when we do need boundaries. We shouldn't be wandering around trying to like love up all the rapists on dark street corners. But it's inspiring to feel that there is power in compassion, there is power in love, there is power in gentleness, and that we don't need to fight back always masculine with masculine. In fact, I think our world really needs that feminine compassion more than ever.
So much. And I love that story of David Data. That's one that I've shared a lot.
Yeah, it's so powerful, huh? There's a question here. When having as a partner a businessman who's really, really busy, how can I support him while he's on his cave time, dealing with all of his stress? He usually goes into silence mode. I don't complain or make questions, but how can I support him to bring him to his masculine with me? Although I think being in cave mode is being quite masculine.
So where was that that question? Or you got it.
It's written
okay.
Privately.
I was like, I missed that one. So he, a man at the end of the day needs that cave time to be able to get back into his masculine, to engage with her feminine. So at the end of the day, he's used up a lot of his testosterone. And if he goes straight into talking, engaging, helping, cooking, cleaning, kids, all of that, he's going to deplete himself even more. And he will be more withdrawn, not focused, not present, irritable, reactive. What he needs in that moment, because then if his stress levels are high, the way a man's cortisol level comes down is by putting his testosterone up. If he comes home and he starts talking with his partner, that's going to increase oxytocin or estrogen, not testosterone, if he is having to engage in a conversation. If he comes home and he goes into cave time, and depending upon the stress of the day, but a cave time that will help him to be able to revive himself is like a 20-minute cave time. If he knows I can go in, and the thing, but men have described this very particular to me. They need to be in a space where they know that there will be no interruptions. That means do not come in and ask your 2-second question, what's for dinner? Or like, what do you want for dinner? Or like, can I get you a drink? Would you like a glass of wine? Those are all interruptions. And so they said, I need to know what I'm going to be able to relax, and no question, no text, no nothing is asked or expected of me. And so when he knows that he has that, and then when he comes out, that she's available, but not going to be upset with him for having taken that time, then it also really helps. So what I tell women is like, let your man have his cave time so he can get all like revived, you know, he can produce some testosterone, because that's what happens when he goes into his cave time. And then when he comes out, don't look busy, because if you look busy, he's not going to want to interrupt. And that's like, I would even tell my partner, like, I'm going to be working in my room, but you can come in anytime, just come visit me. And I said it multiple times, but then he would be like, oh, I peeked in, but you were working. I'm like, I know, but I said, come in. He goes, I didn't want to interrupt, because they don't want to be interrupted, because it's a process. Like, they don't transition as easily and quickly. Their brains function differently. So then I say, like, you know, let him have his cave time and be available. Like, don't be busy when he comes out of it, and don't be upset with him for taking that time. If he feels that he has done anything wrong or disappointed you in any way by taking that time for himself, then he's not as inclined to come and to talk and to connect.
Right.
And then I could go on a lot more, but I mean, let me
more questions, and we've got 3 minutes. And I've got one here that's about the feminine. What are the symptoms of the toxic feminine, and how can a male best hold space for her transformation? So I know we've got a whole call coming up for men in a few weeks, so we'll go deeper into that topic, but maybe you want to give like a snippet, a little preview as this question's coming up. What does a woman look like in a toxic feminine?
So I'm not really, I personally don't go into using the words toxic that's connected with masculine and connected with feminine. So I don't know what you mean by that, but what I can take is like, the way I'm going to just take this question is how can I help a woman when she's in her masculine? So when she's in her controlling, bossy self, to get her into her feminine. So that's the way I'm going to take that question.
Okay.
What do you think?
I agree. I also really dislike the word toxic, and I tend to use the word wounded, because I think using the word toxic is so uncompassionate. And it's like, okay, I might experience it as toxic, but if I'm experiencing something as toxic, then no doubt you're coming from your wound, and it's way more compassionate if I call it wounded rather than toxic. So I also feel the word toxic. It's very charged and very pointy finger. And wounded, or it's like a more compassionate, like, oh, okay, like that really hurt me, but then I imagine it's something's hurting you, so let's see what that hurt is and resolve it together. So I'm with you. The toxic thing is toxic.
and wounded, it's again, how do we respond to those wounds? So it's like some of them, like for me, like I'm a fighter. I'm not a runner. Like I would go in that way. So it's just the wounded feminine is going to cope in different ways as well. But in regards, let's just say, like, if a woman's in her masculine, and how to help her to get into her feminine in that moment. One of the best things that you can do is get her to talk and listen and empathize and validate, because when she talks, then it's producing oxytocin. So if she is in an aggressive mode, or there's cortisol running, or there's testosterone running, or something like that, then you bring the cortisol levels down by getting the oxytocin, the estrogen up. One of the best ways to do that, cuddling without an agenda. So if cuddling without the agenda for sex, that will produce oxytocin. If there's the agenda for sex behind it, then it's not going to have the same effect for producing oxytocin. So guys, I know that gets tricky, and we'll talk about that later. And the other is to get her to talk. And so just like, what's going on? Like, what are you frustrated about? And to hear it and listen. Don't go into problem solving mode. Don't go into giving your perspective. Do not side with the enemy, which means, oh, they were just trying to do this. Don't do that in that moment. Like it's not helpful. And I help. And I know it sounds helpful and logically it makes sense, but there are ways to de-escalate a woman and her emotions. And it may not be what you think, because it's not how a man's brain works. And I go through all of that in the men's program. And it's just like, how to be with a woman and her emotions is get her to talk and let her feel heard. So just what else? And how did that make you feel? And then, oh, I hear that really hurt, and it triggered this for you. Like, say back to her what it is that you heard in that moment. Mm-hmm. So that is one of the best ways that you can help her to get into her feminine. Let me know if you've got, any other questions around that, because I can go into the wounded part again as well.
So we can hold those questions, because we will definitely do. I can't believe we're already an hour. Every time I talk with Justine, it's like, boom, we could just talk for hours. One day we'll do the 10-hour conversation. Everyone can come and tune in. But we're already up to the end of this one. There was quite a deep question from someone, but I think for that last one that was just written to me privately, it'd be way better to have a one-on-one session with you, or to go deeper with you on that. Because we're opening up a lot here in this conversation, and I will post a link here into the chat, or maybe let me see everyone. So that and you're offering a $50 discount for anyone who's joining your program through this talk.
Yes.
Okay, super. So for anyone that hasn't worked with Justine before, it's going to be an incredible journey. You're coaching, right? So you're not just teaching, you're working with the individual women in the program and going through real life situations, right?
Yeah. So this program is so tightly held. There's I have videos. I put a video out every other day, and there's enough time. And there's questions for integration and reflection, which is so important, because I really don't want stuff to stay as information. Like, we learned this, we learned this, we learned this. I really put it in a way like, okay, how is this going to be coming into your life? How do you integrate this into your life? So we have reflection points, and then you can share other people's. I coach the women in the Facebook group. So either through your own reflections and questions that are from the video content, or you can put your own question around your situation. So whether you're single, you're in a relationship, you're dating, and there's something that's happening, how do you deal with that? Then you put your questions there. So throughout the time, then there's coaching that happens in the container of the Facebook. And then we have live group coaching calls as well. So every other week, there's 2 hours where I do laser coaching, and I will go through however many I can. And this part, both for the men and the women in the programs, they love it. Whether you get coached or not, it's equally as powerful. And sometimes even more so watching somebody else be coached, because you're like, wow, yes, yes, yes. There's so much learning and growth that happens by learning from each other. And this is something where women will reflect like, okay, I do this, this, and this, or I'm going to try this. And somebody else is like, oh, thank you for how you articulated that. Yes, I do that as well. And so I find that growth happens on an exponential level.
Yes, absolutely. And the intentional field and everyone coming together, it's just so powerful. And then for all the guys who are here, just to say, although Adored is not a program for you, like we mentioned, there will be a program for men happening a month later, and we'll also do a live call like this, so you can join on that. Women can join on the live call as well. I think it's really helpful for us to like understand more and more about each other. I love how you bring in the hormones as well, that it's not just like a concept of masculine or feminine, but really understanding that we're wired differently, our hormones are different, that the physiology of our bodies really does affect our reality. I think this is, so great that you put it all together.
And I think it helps also to bring understanding and acceptance to it. Because sometimes when I'm like, oh, this is how men are, people are like, oh, men, this is how men are. But then when I'm like, but they are like this because this is what's happening inside of their bodies and this and this. And then women are like, oh, now I get it. And now it's not like he's not wrong for being that way. Now they understand why he's that way. And same for women, or men to women. So I find that this brings so much understanding and compassion. And that's why it can heal the relationship with the masculine. It heals the thing with the father when you learn all of this stuff. And I love geeking out on all of the science behind everything. And I find it to be,
It's so helpful. It depersonalizes it, and it's just like, okay, this is the way we're made. Just a quick practical question: is Facebook critical to the course?
I have, for the time being, that is where the course is happening, because I like all of the engagement and interaction. I don't want to have it split between the videos somewhere else and the conversations happening somewhere else. So right. This is, you can open a fake account that's just for that, so you can come into the group and have it there. But this is where it's the degree, the amount of interaction that can happen back and forth between everybody with the videos and the personal questions. This has been the best one that has all of that for me.
Okay. Yeah, I say the same. I'm still using it for some of my programs, and I always say, just join for the month and you can leave afterwards. But until we find, build a good enough replacement, and we're working on that. Thank you so much, Justine. This has been so great. I just love these conversations. I love how you're able to dive into things that are often charged and just like unravel them with ease and grace and give such beautiful guidance. Really grateful for all the work that you do in the world. And thank you to everyone for joining. We've got some love pouring out of the screen here. And just taking a look around and seeing you all here. Thank you so much for joining.
And so the link is love.
We've got lots of love hearts coming. Thank you. Great conversation. Thank you so much. I needed this. Thank you, ladies. It was great to hear you. Love this community. Let's do more. Thank you. Namaste. We learned so much. It has been wonderful. Thank you all so much. And have a wonderful adored journey, and look forward to seeing you all again soon.